worked. This will be Wednesday, May 27th, as we continue from before. You have to give me a second with the story because I have to get my brain going along, so I have to back up just a little bit. Walking out of the store, I grabbed the Banaka, opened up the package, put the packaging on the shelf and into my pocket, and then walked by everyone. I had other friends who were there stealing stuff because they were horrible kids that I hung out with, bad influences. No, they weren't bad influences. I was just a bad kid. And then got through the first door and opening the second door when the hand came down on my shoulder. And that's when it said, where do you think, or it's like, where do you think you're going, or do you think you're leaving? Whatever it was not a good sound. And I remember hand on the door as I'm staring out this window, and the thoughts that go through my head were a couple. One, if I turn around, this is going to suck. That nothing good was going to come from me turning around, that my whole life was going to change, because I knew I was shoplifting. I mean, I was confused about why I was my hand on the shoulder. I didn't think it was like, hey, you dropped this. I knew something bad was coming. The other part that came to me was I thought about running, because I'm a wrestler, and wrestlers are half ninja. And I figure whoever this old person is who has their arm on my shoulder, I can turn and knock the arm off and spin, and I can run out the door, and they'll never catch me. I would like to say that I did not run because I'm a good person, and that would be the wrong choice. But I was a thief in the process of being bad, so that's definitely being moral was not an issue of mine at the time. What kept me from running was the thought that I had a whole bunch of kids in that store who would give up my name in a heartbeat. And I figured it was better to be caught here than to have them give up my name and get caught and have it come back to like haunt me at school. So I did the hardest thing I've had to do up to that point in my life, which was let go of the door. And I remember having to send like the thought waves to the door or to my hand, like just let go, and letting go and watching that door close and just thinking like that's the end of my life. Like that's the rest of my life as that door shuts. Happy me is on the other side of that door, and I'm on this side. And then the guy turned me around, and I was face to face with the pharmacist, the guy that wears like the long white coat, older bald guy. And I remember him saying, he's like, "Were you planning on paying for that?" And I was like, "Paying for what?" And he was like, "The thing you stole and put in your pocket." And I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about." Playing it cool. And that's when he pulled out the packaging, and he had the wadded up paper and the little plastic, and he was like, "Son, I have the packaging." And then he goes, "You realize we have video cameras. I have you on tape. Do you want to go back and watch it?" And just that thought, oh, crap. So I go, "No." And I reached in my pocket, and I pulled out the Banaka, and I handed it to him. And for a split second, in my mind, I thought, that's it. Now I get to go free. I've learned my lesson. Thank you above for teaching me this, and I'm going to be a better person moving forward, and I'm never going to steal again, and this is what it took to make me a better person, and that's not what happens. That's what happens when you dream. Because what happened for me was he clamped down on my shoulder and walked me through the store. He's like, "You're coming with me." And walked me through the store, and I remember seeing all of my friends and the other wrestlers like stopping and staring at me and coming out of the aisles and staring at me as I got led through there and doing my best to not look up, but it was just, I look up like, oh yeah, they're all staring at me, this is really going to suck. And him leading me back through the store until I got to the back little swinging doors, and led me through until I got to the back swinging doors, and it was like this big open storage room area where they keep like stock and stuff like that. I remember it was like a big open like cave area. He took me in there and he put down the packaging and the Banaka on like a little table, and then grabbed a chair, brought it out, slammed it down in the middle of this whole big room, and he was like, "Sit down." I'm like, "Okay." So I went and I sat down in the little chair, and then he went over to the wall, which is right next to the swinging doors, and there's a phone there, and he called the police. And I listened to him. He's like, "Yeah, I have a shoplifter. He's in custody. Yeah, I have him in the back room." And I'm just thinking like over and over again. I remember doing like the whole like, wake up, wake up, wake up. Was not happening. Not waking up. Oh, this is real. And then he eventually got down the phone call, and he looked at me and he goes, "Son, stay there." And then he just left, like went out the little double doors and left me sitting there. And I'm just like, I don't know what to do. So I stayed there because I was like, is he just right outside the door? Is he messing with me? What's going on? And I remember I had three things go through my head while I was sitting there. One, we had to memorize a poem in English class. And I remember I was memorizing a Shel Silverstein poem called "The Queen is Coming." And I had half memorized that poem. So I kept saying the poem over and over again in my head to try and distract myself so I wouldn't cry. Because I'd like to say that I'm tough, but when you realize that you've just ruined your life, crying lets the sad out. And so I was doing my best to not cry. And so saying that poem over and over again in my head was helping. The other thing, as embarrassing as it is, gangster rap was popular, and I was listening to NWA and Eazy-E and Public Enemy on pretty regular rotation. And the Prophets, Ice Cube, and Dr. Dre told me that whenever the police pull you in, that you don't give up your name, and you stay hard and you stay tough, and no matter what they do to you. And I remember thinking that I was going to stay hard and stay tough. My skinny little white boy was going to revolt against the police, and that did not happen. But in my brain, that's what I was telling myself. And I also remember looking over to the right, about as far away as that wall was the wall of the back room, and there was a door in the middle of it that said emergency exit. And I remember thinking, I could run right now. I could just turn and run out that door, and all my friends are gone from inside. They'd never know. By the time they got back here, I'd be gone. And once again, not my morals that kept me there. What kept me there was the thought of being on video camera, and the fact that they had me on videotape. And if they took that videotape to school and showed it, I'd be easily recognized. And the fact that then I would be arrested in front of all my friends in class. And I was like, it's better to be arrested here than to have it happen at school. So I stayed there just waiting for the cop to show up for fear of making it even worse. Remember the cop showed up. I don't know how long I was there, 15, 20 minutes, just sitting there just thinking about how screwed up my life was. And then I remember the cop coming through. He was a big guy, older guy, and he came through with the pharmacist. And he picked up the packaging in the Banaka, and he was like, is this it? And the guy was like, yeah. And he was like, where's the thief? That's all the cop ever called me, was the thief. And the guy was like, he's over there. And so the cop came over, he's like, you're the thief? And I'm like, I'm the guy that stole stuff, the idiot, yeah. And he came over, he's like, stand up. And I'm like, okay, I stood up. And he's like, and I don't know if he read me my rights or what, but I know he put handcuffs on me, because that I vividly remember. And he didn't do them in front of me, he did them behind my back when he did it. And if you've never had a police officer put handcuffs on you, one, that's good. Two, they hurt. I know you can imagine how much they would hurt, but there's something about cold, pinchy metal that goes onto your bones that hurts in a way that's hard to explain. And it hurt. And everybody going like, ow, when he did it. And he was like, that hurt? I'm like, yeah. And I'm just going, good. And I'm like, oh, well, that sucked. And then he grabbed me by the arm, it was my left arm, and he held it up that way, so I had to like walk on my tiptoes, because he was a bigger guy than I was. And then took me out through the little slappy doors again. I remember walking through the store and looking up and not seeing any of my friends there and thinking, oh, thank God for small miracles. But I did see something that stuck with me, and it was a small thing. And it's not something you would think would bother you, but it bothered me almost more than anything else that happened on this day. It was just looking over, and there was a mom with her daughter, who was like 4 or 5 years old. And I looked over, and the mom saw the police officer, saw me, and then saw the handcuffs. And the mom just took her daughter and moved the daughter behind her. And it was just a little thing, but it was the look of disgust on her face and the thought that I was such a horrible, scummy person that this mom felt she had to protect her daughter from me. It hit hard. And it was just that feeling of, I'm that person. That's who I've become with my choices. And then him leading me through the store. I went out through the little double doors again. I remember as I went through the second door thinking how much my life had changed from how I entered that double door like just a half hour ago. In a half hour, how much my life changed going through this one set of doors. And then his police car was parked just outside those doors, the little curb right there. The lights were going, but no siren. I remember as he led me to the front door, I got to sit in the passenger seat, not the back seat. I don't know why. But I got to sit in the front passenger seat. And as he walked me across, I looked over, and along the length of the building, the far corner of it, there were heads looking around the corner. And there was like 4 or 5 heads over there that were my friends who were watching me get arrested, because that's what friends do. They watch you get arrested so that they can make fun of you later. And I remember looking over and seeing them and just feeling like that whole, and the cops saw them and then saw my reaction. And I remember him saying, thief has a fan club. And just being like, oh, that was mean. And then he put me into the front seat. Putting me into the front seat, things I remember there was a shotgun bolted to the front dash. That's like, I guess like for emergency shooting at people. But the barrel was poking up high enough that when he put me in, because I couldn't do it myself because there's no balance getting into a car, you can't use your arms. He had to hold on to my arm, and the barrel was up so high, like I had to move my head around it to sit down. I'm like, that's really awkward. And then I had to sit down with my hands behind me so I couldn't do the seatbelt. So he did the seatbelt for me and then put the seatbelt on. And I remember what he said to me because it also stuck with me. He clicked the seatbelt, and as he was leaning back, he looked at me with this look of disgust and said, "You little thief, try not to steal anything while you're in my car." And then shut the door on me. And it was just a little thing, but it hurt. I was just like, oh, that just makes me feel like scum. And then he walked around and he got into the front seat and we drove over to the police station. And Noblesville's not big. It's like a 2-minute drive. And I don't remember the drive. I don't remember the handcuffs coming off. The next thing I remember is being in his little, it wasn't an interrogation room. It was just like his office. It was a small office, like the size of my desk area. It was like his whole office, like real tiny. And I remember sitting in there and him having to call my mom and listening to his side of the conversation. And that side of the conversation sucked. Because I got to hear him talk to my mom, like, "Yep, I have your son here at the police station. No, he's fine. He's a criminal, though. Yeah, we called him shoplifting. You need to come pick him up." And just being like, "Oh, that sucks. I don't want to talk to my mom." And then waiting in this little office while he tapped on the little computer. This kid is a criminal, or whatever he types into it. And I remember just having to sit there and wait, and looking around the office, trying to distract myself from crying. Once again, staying tough. And I remember as I'm looking around, there was a wall that was full of wanted posters, like that you see at the post office, like the criminals when they did stuff like that. And so I was looking at the wanted posters, distracting myself, when the cop looked up and saw me looking at him, and he was like, "Oh, is that your future up there? That's where I'm going to find you next time? You're making plans, huh?" I was just like, oh, kick in the gut. And I remember I said something witty like, "No." And I just sat there, and then he went back to typing. And I remember my mom showing up, and my mom not yelling at me, which made it worse, because yelling would have been easier. And what she did was basically just tell me how horribly upset and disappointed she was. And there are words that still stick with me now, some 25 years later, because I remember she gave me a hug, the first thing she did, and then while walking out, she was like, "You understand that your life changes from this point out." She's like, "They understand that you went from being not a criminal to, from this point forward, you are a criminal." Yeah. And she goes, "What you need to understand is yesterday you were my son that I loved and trusted. Today you're a son that I just love." And it was just that feeling of the whole thing. I don't remember much more, because I was driving home. She didn't talk to me on the drive home. I remember sitting in the front passenger seat with a gray Pontiac Bonneville. I remember putting my feet up on the dash and wrapping my arms around my legs and leaning my head against the cold window that was there. And just looking out the window and just thinking about how much I'd screwed up my life. Because when I was 7, I could blame that on the 4th grader. I could blame that on the fact that I was young and didn't know better. But this one, there's no one for me to blame. It was all me. I knew what I was doing was wrong. I knew that I was shoplifting. I knew I was stealing. And I did it anyway. There was nowhere to put the blame but on myself. And I was like, whatever happens from here on out, it's because of something I did. And then I started thinking, what's going to happen with my friends? How are my teachers going to look at me differently? Because I know teachers are going to find out. The kids at school are going to find out. When I walk into a classroom, how is it people are going to see me differently? When I go to apply for a job, because I was 14, I'm going to want a job soon. Do I have to put this on my job? Am I never going to get hired again? What happens when I ask a girl out? If I ask a girl out, the first thing she's going to think of is, "Oh, you're the kid that got arrested for breath spray." And so it was like everything from here on out was like is changed, is different. And it was one of the most depressing moments I can remember in my life. Because I knew it was from things that I did and my own stupidity. And we got home, and Mom was like, "You should probably head up to your room." I was like, "Yeah, that's a good idea." I remember heading up to my room and just laying on my bed and staring up at the ceiling. And my dad got home, My dad is very similar to my mom. Neither one of them were yellers. And they came up to talk to me. And I remember it surprised me that they didn't ground me. And their thinking was, they came up and told me, they're like, we discussed it, and what you need to understand is that your life is going to change from here on out. We don't think you're ever going to steal again. I'm like, oh God, no, never. That'd be horrible. I'm like, but here's what's the problem. Life is going to punish you. Life is going to punish you worse than anything we could possibly do to you. What you need now is our support for you to get through this. So we're going to support you because life is going to suck really bad. And I was like, like, the first step of your punishment is you have to go to school tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, I did not want to go to school the next day. And I had to go to school the next day. And school was awful. It was probably one of the darkest days of my school year. Because kids are horrible. Kids are awful, horrible, mean little creatures. And they attacked me. Called me names. I was called thief. I was called banaka. I was called breath spray. They would throw papers at me that had that written on there during class. And that stuff that bothered me, but I could shake it off. I felt that was stuff that I deserved because it was my own poor choice. What hurt was the things that weren't intentional. And once again, it's weird how it's the small things that have the biggest impact on you. Because for me, I was walking in, and I still remember it to this day, my advanced English class. Kids I'd known for several years that I got along with, and there were several girls in the front row, and I walked in, they looked up and saw me, and they had like their pencil pouches out and stuff like that, and they saw me and collected their stuff together, their pencil pouches, and all put them together while looking at me with a look that said, you're going to steal my stuff if I leave it out. And it was just the thought that I had changed their viewpoint of me. It was just them cleaning up their stuff and looking at me like I was that scummy kid that stabbed me more than any of the words kids threw at me. It was just the way that they behaved that hurt. Then I had to go to court. A couple weeks later, if you've ever been to Noblesville, they have a town square in Noblesville, and there's a big building with a clock tower on top. That was the building that I had to go to when I had my court case. I had to go to court there, and I had to go in front of a judge, and the judge talked to me. And the judge was stern. He gave me a hard time about stealing breath spray. And so I remember what came from it was he goes, all right, listen, son, you have good grades in school. This is my only semester I had straight A's. I have no idea how it happened, but it was like a really great first semester. After the rest of my class, that was normal. But straight A's my first semester. And he goes, and you've not gotten in trouble at school, and you have nothing on your criminal record. And I'm like, I don't? Because apparently, when I was 7 years old, it doesn't go on your criminal record because 7 years old. And I was like, yay. He goes, because of that, we're going to give you deferred probation. I'm like, I have no idea what that means. He goes, here's how deferred probation means. As of right now, you're going to walk out of this courtroom and nothing bad is going to happen to you on one condition. I go, yeah. He goes, as long as a police officer never has a reason to run your name through the system between now and the day you turn 18, this disappears like it never happened. I go, yeah. He goes, but if a police officer ever runs your name through the system for anything that you do, if you are out after curfew running around with friends and they pull you over and you get your name run, if you're at a party and something bad is going on and you're innocent but we run your name, anything pops up, it says on your record to immediately pull you in, hold you there in custody, call your parents, and then you have to come in front of this court again. I go, uh-huh. And he goes, when that happens, two things are going to occur. I go, yeah. He goes, one, whatever it is you get pulled in for, you get the maximum penalty for it. Whatever the maximum punishment is, you're going to get that. Number two, I'm going to come back and punish you for this crime, and I'm going to throw the maximum punishment at you for this one too. He's like, do you understand that? I'm like, I understand that. He's like, so as long as you make it to 18, you're fine. I'm like, okay, thank you. And as much as being arrested at 14 sucked, it also helped shape my life in a positive way, which is something I never would have thought of at the time. I come from a rough childhood, stuff that I don't really get into much with you guys, but drugs and alcohol is rampant in my family. I am the only person in my family who has not either had rehab or drugs or alcohol or something like that. And it goes back to this arrest at 14. I'm the only person in my family who's not spent time in jail. I've been arrested, but I've not been in jail. My family considers me the most normal person in my family, which I pointed out a number of times is not right, because this is not normal. But in my family, this is incredibly normal. And so I had my uncle would get arrested in jail when I was in junior high. My grandparents were alcoholics, and we couldn't go out to eat after 4 o'clock because they'd get thrown out of restaurants because they were such horrible alcoholics. And it's what I grew up with, was just knowing that that was in my bloodline, that if drugs and alcohol, that would ruin my life, because I saw it ruin so many people's lives in my family. So when I got arrested at 14, it helped me make good choices in high school, because I was paranoid about getting arrested again. So whenever I was out with friends and they started drinking, I didn't, because I did not. Getting arrested was the worst experience I ever had. I did not want to do it again. And so when they drank, I wouldn't. When they made poor choices, I didn't, because I did not want to get in trouble. I wanted to avoid having to go down that same path, and I was paranoid about what would happen. I knew that if I started drinking or if I started doing drugs, that it'd be very tough for me to say no, because it's tough for everyone in my family to say no, and it's changed all of their lives. I don't know if I would be here in front of you today if I hadn't been arrested when I was 14, because if I hadn't had this to make me make the right choices, I might very well have made the wrong choices. And if I had started drinking and doing drugs in high school, it would have been hard for me to correct that path, because it was in my blood so strongly. So it helped me make the right choices. So I did not drink throughout high school for fear of that. I didn't do drugs in high school because of that same fear, until I could at least turn 18. And I do remember there was one other moment that goes along with this. That was a couple weeks later. After school, I was sitting in the hallway, because I didn't, after they had a wrestling meet, I wouldn't go out to the McDonald's with that because I didn't want to get in trouble again. And so I would just stay at the school and do homework. And I'm like, I'm going to be a good little nerd and just stay here and do homework and not get arrested anymore. And I remember I was sitting in this back hallway doing homework after school, waiting for the wrestling meet to start, when this kid walked up, or was walking by. And we had scary kids in Noblesville. We had straight up greasers, like Dally level greasers, who brought knives to school and stuff like that, and would show you switchblades in the hallway. It was scary, and this was one of them, and he was a scary kid. And I remember him looking over and seeing me, and me seeing him, and being like, oh, crap. Like, don't talk to me, don't talk to me, don't look at me, don't look at me. But he walked straight over to me and stood above me. I remember like looking down and seeing his boots. I'm like, I don't want to look up, I don't want to look up. And he's like, hey, are you Broviac? I remember going, yeah. He goes, you the kid that got arrested for stealing breath spray? I'm like, oh, seriously. So I look up, I'm like, yeah, that was me. And he just stood there and stared at me for a minute. He goes, life sucks right now, doesn't it? And I was like, yeah, thanks for rubbing that one in. He goes, it gets better. I went, what? He goes, it gets better. I was arrested when I was in 8th grade for stealing pencils from a store. And I went, what? He goes, one of the worst choices I ever made. My friends made fun of me. My dad made fun of me. I thought it was going to be the end of my world. But it got better. He's like, a couple weeks went by. People stop paying attention to you. They pay attention to something else. The life keeps going. He's like, you just got to make it through a couple weeks and things will be okay. And I went, okay. And then he just turned around and walked away. One of the weirdest experiences I've ever been through. But he was right. That guy stopping and talking to me, I was like, if that guy can do it, then I can do it. And he was right. A couple weeks later, some other kid made a stupid choice. All the attention turned to that other kid. People stopped paying attention to me. Things went back to normal. Kids stopped treating me differently, and life continued. It was just a matter of making it through that time, feeling like the world was going to end. And I made it through that time, feeling like the world was going to end, and then things got better. And that guy talking to me, as weird as it was, it's the little things you do in life that make impressions on people. And there's no way that guy thinks that I'm still telling stories about that random conversation in the hallway. He probably doesn't even remember it. But I vividly remember him stopping and talking to me in the hallway, and the fact that him taking time, it meant something to me. And that arrest kept me from getting in trouble with the police until I turned 18. And I turned 18 my senior year. I have a late birthday, May. Hasn't changed, just had it. And so I remember I got to my 18th birthday and I was like, yay, you've not been arrested, go me. And things were good. The problem was, I didn't know if it was actually off my record. I didn't know if I could go into the police station and ask. I was afraid if I still got picked up by the police, it'd still be on there. So I was like, well, maybe they meant like the end of my turn 18. So I was like, maybe I should wait till I'm 19. So I'm totally paranoid. So I go to college at IU. Excuse me. And at IU, it's tough to bring your car with you because there's so many people and so few parking spots. And I was one of the few kids that got to bring my car because I saved up my money and I camped out to get a parking spot. You had to get a parking pass. I just camped outside of a building at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I got a parking pass. There's like 1,000 kids in my dorm. I went to Wilkie. And I was one of 50 kids to get a parking pass for this huge dorm. With that, I had a sports car, a Mazda RX-7. Which is really cool, but it only had 2 seats in it. Then it had it had a hatchback, where it has like a glass bubble in the back, where it's like a flat area so you can see into it. But being stupid kids, we would pack it full of people. I would ride the driver, and I would have like 2 people sitting in the passenger seat, and then we'd fit like 3 or 4 people in the back, and we'd close them in there, and they would be like so tight, you'd like push on the glass window to get it like, and finally close, and like they make little squeaky sounds. And then we'd like drive to the movie theater, to the mall, and stuff like that. And it was fun. And so my freshman year of college, on my dorm floor, I made friends. A kid by the name of Josh Fisher, we called him Fish. We're very creative. And a kid named Mo Simmons. And Mo Simmons turned 19 in November. And I remember it was November because it was after Halloween. And so in November, and they wanted to throw him a party on our dorm floor. And I was like, oh, that sounds fun. I was like, what are you guys going to do for him? They're like, well, we're going to do a big beer blast. And I'm like, oh. Still wasn't drinking yet. Because still paranoid. I'm like, I just turned 18 like 4 months ago, not ready for this whole getting, or 6 months ago. I was like, not ready to get in trouble yet. And I'm like, well, that's fine. He's like, I won't go. I'll give him a present later. And then Fish came and talked to me in a little bit on the side. He's like, hey, bro. I'm like, yeah. He's like, I have a favor. I'm like, yeah, what's up, man? He's like, it's about the party. And I'm like, Fish, you know I can't go. He's like, no, I understand. It's like, the rest thing is fine. I'm like, good. So I'm like, what's up? He goes, I have a 21-year-old who's going to buy the beer for us. I'm like, all right, good for you. Still not going. He's like, that's fine. Here's the issue. We don't have a car to go buy the beer. And I'm like, I know where this is going. And he's like, can I borrow your car to go buy it? Because that way we can get it back because we can't just carry it. In my head, I'm thinking, Fish, I like him, but he's a little on the crazy side. And I don't trust him driving my car. Let alone my car full of beer with another guy I don't know. I can see them getting into a wreck and then not being on my insurance, and my parents yelling at me and taking away my car, and me never getting to drive again until like I'm 25. And I'm like, that does not strike me as a good idea. So I'm like, I'd rather not. But at the same time, peer pressure, because it was my good friend and it was his party and I was the only way they were going to be able to do it. So I go, listen, how about this? I'll drive you instead. That way I know whoever's driving is responsible, and they'll make it better. He's like, you do that? I'm like, yeah, not a problem. He's like, well, it's going to be 3 of us. There's going to be me, you, and there's going to be the 21-year-old. I don't remember the guy's name. I'm like, that's fine. And so they got a bunch of hockey bags, which are these really big duffel bags. In fact, you make those little duffel bags. Imagine one big enough to fit a person inside, and that's a hockey bag. And so they got those to put the beer in, and they put those in the back of my car, and Fish sat in the back where the little window was, and then the 21-year-old sat next to me, and then we drove around to all these different liquor stores. And it made me so nervous. Because we'd park outside, and he'd go inside, and he'd buy cases of beer. And the case is like, you do this thing that pop like the 24 and 30 cans at a time. And they bought all these huge cases, and they put so many of them in the back of my car. The back of my car like started to go down. And I'm like, oh, getting nervous. Each time we stopped, I'm like, this is not going to be good. Someone's going to pull us over. This is going to be bad. I'm like, let's get back. I'm like, I'm going to be done. And so I kept being a little wussy and freaking out because I'm like, I don't want to be arrested again. It was really bad the first time. And so eventually I convinced them, like, let's go back and just park and be done. And finally they decided, like, all right, let's do it. So we get back to the dorm, freaking out. And the only parking space, like on the far side of the parking lot, on the opposite side, I'm like, it's fine, whatever, just park the car. So I parked the car, and so then they're loading, they open up the little back, which is all glass. We pop it open, and we have a blanket we'd thrown over all the beer, because, not stupid. We'd thrown a blanket over the beer so you couldn't see it. They pulled the blanket back, and they were putting all the beer into these big hockey bags. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, I don't want to be here at all. And so I decided, I'm like, hey, I have an idea. Why don't I go up to the dorm, and I'll go get our friends to come down and help you. And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, that's nice of you. I'm like, yeah, nice. And I'm away from this. So they're like, all right. So I go ahead. I'm like, oh, thank God. So I take off across the parking lot. So I'm like walking away. They're behind me. And I'm like, finally, good choice. I'm away from that. Everything is good. As I'm crossing the parking lot, I get all the way to the last row of cars. And to the left of me, out of nowhere, a voice goes, hey, where are you going? And I turn over, and there's two cops just walking across the parking lot. I'm just like, are you kidding me? This is my luck. Walking across the parking lot, and they just have me strolling through the parking lot. That's the way it works. So I keep walking, and I'm like, to my dorm, building right over there. And I just keep going, like, well, hey, come back here. And I'm like, busy walking. And they go, hey, come back here, kid. I'm like, oh, crap. And so I come back, I'm like, yeah. And they go, and they turn on flashlights, and they go, what's in the car? And the flashlights go over to my car, where I'd left Fish and the 21-year-old. Fish and 21-year-old had heard all of this, and being smart, they had taken our blanket and thrown it over all the beer, and then closed the big glass back, so you can see the blanket, but you can't see what's underneath of it. And they both leaned nonchalantly against the back of the car, and the whole definitely nothing illegal going on in this area posed. And so they were both leaning against it, and so like, what's in the car? To which I replied, car stuff. Nailed it. And so they're like, why don't you come over here? I'm like, okay. So I walk over with them, and the other two guys are sitting right there against the car, and they get over and they use the flashlights to look inside my windows, and you can see this blanket with a whole bunch of lumpy stuff underneath it. And they go, what's underneath the blanket? And I go, I don't know. That was the best answer I had. And they go, well, why don't we open the back and look? And I go, no. Because that sounded like a question, and I don't want to say yes. And they go, well, we'd really like you to open the back so we can look at it. And I go, no. Still saying. They go, all right, listen, son, there's two ways this is going to go. I go, uh-huh. They go, option one, you open the back, and we're going to lift up that blanket, and we're going to see what's underneath there. And I go, option two. They go, option two, my friend and I are going to sit here on the trunk and have a conversation while he radios for a tow truck. Tow truck is going to come and it's going to tow your car down to police impound. Once it's in police impound, we're going to have a locksmith come out. The locksmith's going to break the lock and open up the back. At that point, we're going to open up your trunk and look underneath that blanket. If there's anything illegal underneath that blanket, we're going to come back here tonight, and then we're going to arrest you. And then you're going to have to pay for the tow truck, and you're going to have to pay for the impound, and you're going to have to pay for the locksmith. Which option do you want? And I'm like, getting arrested and spending a whole lot of money. Click, and I open up the trunk. And so the back of it pops open. And I remember to this day, the two police officers lifted up the blanket, and at the same time, they both did this. Oh, Jesus. Because there was so much beer in the back of my car. And I'm like, oh, that is not a good sound. And so they looked at the three of us, and they go, so whose car is this? And Fish and the 21-year-old both looked at me, and they go, his car. And they looked at me, the cops, and they go, is this your car? And I really considered saying no, and just being like, take the car. I don't know who it belongs to. Must be some idiot. You can have it. But then I figured my parents would kill me, and that'd be bad, because it was a nice car, and I liked it. So instead, I go, yeah, that's my car. So they, the police officers, turn to Fish and the 21-year-old, and they go, gentlemen, you're free to go. And they were able to leave. Because they weren't breaking the law, because they weren't in possession of it, because it wasn't their car. And they go, really? And he goes, unless you want to stay. And they go, no. And they both leave. And the police officer turns to me, and he goes, son, you're under arrest for possession of alcohol. And I went, are you kidding me? I don't even drink. He goes, son, I don't care. And I'm like, once again, handcuffs. Right there, handcuffs on, hurt again, and he sits me down on the little chair I sit down on the curb next to my car, and they sat in the back, and they called up a police car, and the police car arrived, and then pulled up, and I remember looking up at my dorm. It was like my dorm was 14 stories tall,
Pardon the interruption, students and staff have a couple of announcements. 8th graders, don't forget to pack a lunch for the 8th grade charging on to the high school picnic